Well, now let's take that water tour that we took last summer. Jim and I enjoyed it, and we know you will too. This water garden is a good example of what you can do with just a plain rectangular backyard here in Oklahoma City. They've made it into something really special.
This pond is a good example of one of the simpler methods of constructing a garden pond. It has a PVC liner. That's a heavy-duty plastic liner that lasts quite a long time. It's just a hole that's dug in the ground and lined with the PVC liner. The edges come up over the lip, and then the edge is disguised, in this case, by flagstones that are cemented together. You can use any sort of edging, any stonework, brickwork, or even woodwork to cover up the edge, and the black PVC liner is quite inconspicuous, lasts quite a long time, and again, it's very easy and quick to install.
One tip we might give you on designing a pond like this that it's at ground level is that you want the flagstones to slope up slightly as they approach the edge of the pond. That way, if there's water coming off the roof of the house or any herbicides or fertilizers draining from the lawn, they will not drain or flow into the pond. You want to avoid any excess water coming in here other than rainwater.
We have a very nice example of a yellow water lily. If you remember down at the Myriad Gardens, there were several very large clumps of lilies down there which were very effective in a large space like that. It's not a miniature, this is a small variety of water lily. It's at about the maximum size it's going to get, so you can match the variety and the size of the lily to whatever size pond that you decide to build. Actually, there are smaller miniature water lilies. In those, you can fit 2 of them in half of a whiskey barrel. So you can match the size of your lilies to whatever size pond you've got.
Now, this backyard has been developing over the past few years into a water garden haven. This pond was done last year, and then just 2 weeks ago, they finished this decking and filled this pond with water. This is a pond that is built up slightly, boxed in, and again lined with PVC and surrounded by wood decking. And it's a good time to mention that on a new pond like this, you don't just fill it up and put the plants and the fish in right away. There's got to be a transition period. You fill it with water first, let the water come up to temperature, treat it, put the plants in, quarantine the fish, and then they go in last of all.
You'll notice a lot of the marginal plants aren't established yet. Again, this is a very young pond. They will, if you give them a chance to grow, fill in well. Also look at some of the water lilies. These are different ones from what we saw either down at the garden or in this older pond. If you notice the red foliage on this one right near me and the variegated foliage on the one closest to you, these are tropical water lilies. This red foliage and variegated foliage is only available in the tropical lilies. Now, we have hardy lilies and tropical lilies. The hardy lilies are just what they sound like. They will survive Oklahoma's winters without any extra care. The tropical lilies will not survive the winter. If you want to save them over, you need to take some special care. But again, there's variety in flowers, and in the tropicals, variety in the foliage.
One last thing we want you to notice about this water garden is how nicely they've tied in raised beds to make the transition from ground level up to a higher level with the second pond. Everything ties in, there's a harmonious relationship here, and this might give you some ideas for your own water garden so you don't just end up with a hole in the ground in your backyard. Do a little bit of landscaping around it to soften the edges, and you'll end up with something really special.
As part of this water garden tour, the Oklahoma Water Garden Society presents 2 prizes to the entries. One is for Grand Prize Newly Planted Garden, and one is for Grand Prize for Established Water Garden. What we're visiting right now is the winner of the Grand Prize for the Newly Planted Garden. Believe it or not, this was all planted just this spring. Now you'll notice, well, you won't notice one part, that's that this is a PVC liner pond, just like the one we just visited. The edging treatment is different. You see it's lined with rocks along the top, but it also has a dry stacked wall of stones that extend down into the pond, which cover the PVC liner very effectively, so you don't see any of the liner at all. It gives a very nice effect. You don't even notice the plastic liner. It's a beautiful effect. It looks like it's just a rocky pool.
One thing about the rock is that it does not extend all the way to the bottom. As with most water gardens, this pond is dug in stair-step fashion. There's a shelf that extends around the perimeter of the pond about 18 inches deep, and on that shelf rest some plants that need to be at a more shallow depth than others, such as this parrot feather here and the pickerel weed. They all sit on the shelf, and then further out into the pond at a more of a depth, at least 18 inches deep, are the water lilies. One thing I might mention is over across the pond there's a blue tropical water lily. Now the tropicals are the only group of water lilies that you'll find the intense blue color. With the hardy lilies that can take Oklahoma winters, you won't get that blue color. So if you're looking for that, you might try some of the tropicals, but do remember that you need to bring them in the winter time.
Some other types of water garden plants besides the submerged marginal ones and the lilies, we have a few such as this water hyacinth, which are free-floating plants. They just float directly on the surface. They don't need to be planted in any pot or be planted at a certain depth. Other types which are actually around the edge of the pond, like our cattails, some of the ornamental grasses, are bog plants. Now these types of plants enjoy growing in saturated soil but not actually submerged in the water. This particular case, these plants are in the ground next to the pool. They're kept constantly moist by being watered several times a day. A better way to do this would have been, when this PVC liner was put in, to have that put in and come up about 4 or 5 inches below the soil surface and extend to the back of the planting. That way it would be constantly watered by the moisture, by the water in the pool. That way avoid the need to be constantly watering. A few other plants that work well as bog plants that you don't always think about as bog plants are some of the ferns like Boston fern, caladium, even hibiscus will work well as a bog plant, even though they do not have to be grown that way.
One nice addition to most water gardens that really makes them special is some kind of water feature or water fountain or waterfall. At the very back here, they've constructed a waterfall out of a stack of rock. And it's not just a matter of piling up rock and running a pipe up through the center. You really want to stack it so that the water cascades down at different angles and breaks up into small droplets so that you get that nice high-pitched sound to it. Also, there's a hollow area at the back of the waterfall to act as sort of a sound box to magnify the sound. There's a little bit of a deep pool where the water finally hits at the bottom, again to help create more of a sound than just splashing onto a flat rock. So if you're going to construct a waterfall, take some time piling the rock up so that the water will cascade and give you that nice sound. Now there are other water features that you can put in, such as little fountains to go up the center and such, and some pile down or some water cascades down statuary. With that, you want to be careful. If there's any statuary that's made of copper or other metals, those will not work well in a pond because the metal can be toxic to the fish. So do be careful what you put in the pond.
The same goes with your plumbing. Be careful and avoid copper plumbing.
Right. Even though we're in a very shady backyard, they still have 2 nice water gardens started. And one thing you need to remember is that to grow water lilies, they require a minimum of 5 hours of full sun a day. There are some, however, that will tolerate lower levels of light. In addition, there are other plants that you can grow in the water garden if you're in a shady backyard and still have a nice green array of plants. Towards the back of this pond is some more water hyacinth, and this particular grouping is in full bloom. Notice it tolerates the shade quite well. The plants have a little bit broader leaves, a little bit taller, because they are in the shade. Another thing I want you to notice about this small water garden is at the back they have a little fountain, and it is serving an additional function other than just providing some nice sound. with the water splashing over the rock, that helps to oxygenate the water.
Now, usually the oxygen in the ponds is provided by the submerged plants, and it also can be provided by another plant, and that's algae. You often don't think of algae as a plant, but it uses up the carbon dioxide and the nutrients in the water and produces oxygen for the fish to breathe. Now, there are several types of algae, one of which is the floating type of algae, and that causes what's known as green water. If you notice my hand, you can scarcely see it, just a few inches below the surface of the water. That's because of the amount of algae that's in there. Actually, green water is not unhealthy in the mild degrees such as this. As I said, the algae is using up the nutrients, forming oxygen for the fish. The fish, it won't bother the fish at all. It is aesthetically not as pleasing because you can't see your fish as well. You can't see any submerged plants. To control algae, the free-floating algae, you need to provide plants that will compete with the algae for the nutrients and the carbon dioxide and the light. If you have some oxygenating plants like the anacarus or the hornwort, you need to have at least 50% of the bottom surface covered with that in order to provide enough competition, or you need about 60 to 70% coverage of the surface of the water with the floating plants such as the water hyacinth or the water lettuce that we have here, or with water lily pads. 60 to 70% coverage will provide the competition needed to keep the algae at a minimum so that you do not get severe green water problems. Now, it's normal, especially on a new pond that's just establishing its balance, to have several algae blooms that build up with green water and then decrease in populations of the algae in the water clearing. It's normal to have several of those in a season. Even on established ponds, it's normal to have at least one in late spring, early summer. So it's not really a problem. It does occur. If you try and change the water, you're just getting yourself back to ground one. You need to let the pond come to a balance in order to keep the green water under control.
Now, the fish in these ponds provide a vital component in the balance of a healthy water garden. When you have fish swimming in the pond, they produce carbon dioxide that the plants absorb. Also, they produce waste products that are high in nitrogen that helps the plant to grow. With fish in the pond, you don't need to feed them every day. There are plenty of water bugs around and other things for the fish to feed on. However, there are people who will spread a little bit of food on the water to socialize with the fish and bring them to the surface. If you're going to have fish in a water garden, to overwinter them, you're going to need to make one end slightly deeper. The fish need a minimum of 18 inches of depth in order to overwinter. Some people make one end of their pond much deeper than that so the fish can go down and escape any chances of freezing through the winter time, but you do need to provide extra provisions for them to make it through the winter. One nice thing about fish is they're not particular about whether your backyard is sunny or shady. So here in a shady backyard water garden, the fish are perfectly happy.
This garden pool is in a much more formalized setting than many of the ones that we've visited so far. It's connected, the brick edging ties in with the brick walks, which go back to the vegetable garden, an azalea garden, and a rose garden. And this theme of the brickwork ties the whole backyard in together so that the pool is an integral part of the landscape and not just a puddle of water sitting in the backyard. This one, just like all the other pools we've visited, is a PVC liner with the edge covered up, in this case by brickwork instead of stone. Now, one of the big advantages of the PVC liner, you'll notice a very, very varied and sinuous shape to it. With the PVC liner, you can have any shape, any size that you'd like. There are other building materials that are commonly used. You can buy fiberglass pools that are already pre-made in a certain size. They're rigid, so all you need to do is dig the hole and set them in, and you've got your pond already. The disadvantage of the fiberglass pools are, number one, the cost, And number two, the size and shape is determined by whatever you can buy from the manufacturer. You don't have the option to fit the pool into your landscape to the degree that you can with a PVC liner. Now, cement pools are the old standard, and they do still work. They can be used very, very well, but it's much more difficult to get the curving lines that you can get on either the fiberglass or the PVC. They're hard, difficult to build because you have a lot of material, and they also will tend to crack more and leak than the PVC or fiberglass. But there are many successful pools made of concrete, but as you noticed, most we've seen are PVC liner. It's becoming the material of choice for backyard garden pools.
Now, this water garden is in partial shade, partial sun, and the way this gardener is managing that is to try to keep part of this river birch pruned back in the area where he has his lilies growing. There are some plants further back in the shade that will tolerate that, but as we mentioned in the last garden, the lilies require at least 5 hours of full sun a day. So he'll need to keep his river birch pruned back as much as possible to allow that sun to come in. Otherwise, the lilies just won't grow.
There are several other plants in this pool that we haven't looked at yet. One of these is a floating duckweed back in this container. You'll notice it's in a black nursery container that's sunk down almost to the rim. This is to keep our hungry little goldfish here from totally gobbling up every bit of plant that there is, protecting it from the goldfish. As the extra comes out, or as it grows and we have extra, you can move that out for the goldfish to eat, but this provides some protection so the plant is not totally gone before it has a chance to grow. Another marginal plant that we haven't looked at yet is the Sagittaria, which again grows along the border, has very nice white flowers. And another aquatic plant that is a relation of the water lily, and that is the lotus. Now, lotus will come in either white or pink flowers. The leaves are rather unique. They're round with the stem coming right out of the center of them. The blossom of the lotus will bloom over a period of 3 days. The first day, it will open up partially, and then the second day, it will open up a little bit more, a little bit wider, and then on the third and final day, the petals will open up even further, and after that third day, the petals will fall off completely, and then in the middle you'll see a seed pod form, and the seed pod, when it's dried, can be used and is used for dry flower decorations. It's a very decorative seed pod, so you get two uses. You get the flowers and you do get the seed pod forming at the end.
The one thing about tropical water lilies is that they require overwintering. You don't want to have to rebuy them every spring. That can get pretty expensive. So when frost is approaching in the fall, you'll need to lift the plants out of the water, and in the soil, tubers will have formed. You remove those tubers from the pot in the soil and store them in wet sand or wet peat moss in a mason jar that's closed up tight to hold in the moisture, or a Ziploc bag, and then store those at an even 45 degrees. If you just bring them in, put them in wet sand, and keep them in the garage, with our fluctuating Oklahoma weather temperatures, the water lilies will come out of dormancy prematurely through the winter time. So you want to keep them at 45 degrees through the winter, and then come spring, bring them out of that temperature regime, either in your refrigerator or whatever, bring them into a sunny window or put them in an aquarium under lights indoors, pot them up and let them grow, and wait until your water temperature gets to be about 70 degrees. And usually this will be around the end of May, 1st of June. Then you can put the tropical lilies out. If you put them out too soon, what will happen is they'll get chill injury and they'll be stunted and set back and not start blooming for you quite as soon. This gardener has a tropical lily that is a night bloomer, and you might want to try some of those. He tells us that the blooms come out at 4 p.m. and last through the night until 11 o'clock the next morning, so that'll give you some color at nighttime as well. Now, on care of water lilies and the water plants in general, they do need fertilizing, and most water gardeners will get fertilizer in granular or tablet form, and once a month they'll push that down into the soil in the plants. One thing we need to mention is when you're potting up water garden plants, don't put them in commercial potting mix. You want to put them in garden soil that doesn't have any chemicals in it, and then submerge them in a pot that is fairly heavy, either a large nursery container that's weighted down with rocks or a clay pot, and again submerge those down in the soil. Don't forget to fertilize them, and again remember that they do need full sun for success in growing them. This is an example of a water garden that is brand new. The entire thing is just 2 weeks old. One thing I want you to notice about this one is that they've used local native sandstone. It has that red Oklahoma clay color to it. And although that gives it a very native appearance and the rock is cheap and locally available, one thing you might be careful about in using the red sandstone such as this is when water cascades down over it, you may get some particulate matter into the water that's undesirable. It may cause a little bit of clouding, so you might want to watch that. But otherwise, it gives a nice native effect, especially to put native plants around. One last thing we want to mention, for those of you who work a regular 8 to 5 working day, in choosing your water lilies, it might be a good idea to select only night bloomers, because when you get home at night, they'll just be opening, and they'll stay open until about mid-morning the next day, so you can enjoy them. If you choose a day bloomer, the problem with that is that they're closed the entire time that you're home. So think about that when you're selecting some plants.
Now you'll probably be interested in what you're getting into when you get started on a water pond like this. Once it's established, you get a lot of work digging out the hole, but once it's established, 1 hour a week for the general maintenance during the growing season should be enough to keep it in good shape. Now for that maintenance, you'll need to be picking off any dead leaves or yellowing leaves, picking off any spent blossoms, getting rid of any leaves or other trash that might have fallen into the water. Now in the fall, you'll need a little bit more maintenance. You'll need to clean the bottom of your pool, get rid of any sediment so that it doesn't overwinter. Anything that settles to the bottom will provide nutrients for algae for growth next spring. So a good cleaning is called for in the fall. You will need to make some provision for your fountains and other waterworks so that those pipes don't freeze. Generally, you leave the pump on so that you still get water circulation. Point it towards the top so it will leave a spot in the ice open for gases produced by the fish to escape. Now, if you don't have a pump going, you want to leave a board floating on the surface so that if the surface does freeze over, you'll be able to lift that board and gently crack the ice. Don't pound on the ice with a hammer or other hard, heavy object because you can damage the fish. So the amount of work during the season is about an hour per week, and in the fall, a bit more intensive in order to get it ready to go through the winter.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.